Imagine being forced to leave everything behind your home, your land, your community with no promise of return. Sadly, this is the daily reality for millions across the sub Saharan Africa. I'm Fernando Rojas, and my team and I will be talking about this big problematic, and we will be looking beyond the headlines to understand the roots, the current phase, and the complex actors in one of the world's most pressing yet often overlooked humanitarian crises. To start off, this isn't a single story with a single villain. It's a complex, sprawling web of a crisis stretching across the sub-Saharan Africa, a silent emergency that for many has not just lasted years, but generations. To understand the present, we need to feel the weight of the past. How do you measure the lifespan of a crisis? Not just in years, but in lived experience. The roots of many conflicts go back to the colonial era, where borders drawn by distant powers grouped rival communities together, planting seeds of future strife. This is the old unresolved grievance. Then, the post independence and Cold War period, where the proxy wars were located. Support for authoritarian regimes and the flood of weapons made stability a fragile dream. From the 1990s to the early 2000s, devastating civil wars in countries like Liberia and the Democratic Republic of Congo created the first massive waves of displacement we still see today. The crisis was already taking its modern form. In the 21st century, new pressures emerged. Climate change intensified through the floods, forcing farmers and headers into conflict over shrinking resources. This environmental stress acts as a threat multiplier, and simultaneously the rise of violent extremist groups like the Boko Haram in the Lake Chad Basin in the Horn of Africa, and ISIS affiliates in the Sahel, and a new wave of terror and displacement. This is a bunch of accumulated story of unresolved crises in the burden that millions of sub-Saharan Africans carry on their backs every single day. The question is, what does this reality look like now?
Thanks, Fernando. I'm reporting from the front lines of this protected crisis. To put it bluntly, the situation is not solved, it is getting worse. The numbers are staggering. Over 30 million people are probably displaced within sub-Saharan Africa. That's more than the entire population of some European countries. But behind that every number is a human story. Let me put you in context. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, a toxic mix of dozens of armed militias fighting over minerals and land has created one of the world's forgotten crises. Millions are interminably displaced, living in constant fear, with minimal aid. Across the Sahel, in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the spread of extreme violence has made vast areas ungovernable. Whole villages empty overnight. This is the fastest growing displacement crisis in the world. In Somalia, decades of conflict have now meet a climate catastrophe. Severe drought pushes those who survive violence to the brink of famine. In South Sudan, a fragile peace agreement has not undone the damage of a brutal civil war that displaced a third of its population. In the Lake Chad Basin, the devastation caused by Boko Haram has created a loop of displacements between Nigeria, Cameroon, Niger, and Chad. People are trapped between the terrorism and often having military responses, and the response is critical for them. The world's attention shifts to other emergencies, while here the needs for food, water, shelter, and protection only grow. This is a temporary problem. It's a permanent, painful reality for a continent.
So, who are the key players in this immense challenge? It is a complex ecosystem. First and foremost are the refugees who cross international borders and internally displaced persons who remain within their own countries. They are not just victims, they are survivors, showing immense resilience. Then, neighborhood African nations. Bear an incredible burden. Countries like Uganda, Sudan, and Ethiopia, often struggling with their own poverty, host the vast majority of refugees. Their generosity is immense, but their resources are stretched thin. Then there are the perpetrators and enablers. This includes armed groups, terrorist organizations, and often governments with poor governance, corruption, and security forces that sometimes commit human rights abuses themselves. On the response side, we have the international community, led by the UNHCR and the World Food Programme. They provide life saving aid but are perpetually begging for funds from donor nations. The African Union provides a political framework, but its capacity for direct intervention is limited. Organizations like the Red Cross and Medicine Sans Frontières and countless local African NGOs are boots on the ground, often working in the most dangerous conditions where larger agencies cannot go. And finally, the donors. Western governments like the USA and private foundations, their funding is vital, but is often unpredictable and tied to political interest, leaving long term planning nearly impossible.
So, where does this leave us? What are the conclusions we can draw from this? First, we must be clear. There are no easy solutions. These crises are deeply entrenched in politics, economics, and climate. They will not be solved by aid alone. Second, the international system, as it exists, is not equipped to fix this. The UN Security Council is often deadlocked by geopolitical rivalries. Funding falls catastrophically short every year. The principle of burden sharing is a myth when the poorest countries are hosting the most people. Third, and perhaps the most importantly, we must shift our perspective. This is not a temporary humanitarian problem that can be mopped up. This is a long term structural crisis that requires long term thinking, investing in local economies and host communities, strengthening governance, and most critically, funding climate adaptation programs. And beyond the policy level, we also need to confront the narratives that shape global attitudes. For decades, African displacement has been treated as an inevitable tragedy happening somewhere far away, instead of as the predictable result of global inequality, historical exploitation, and a world economy that benefits from African resources while neglecting African stability. As long as the stories of refugees are reduced to numbers or distant headlines, it becomes easier for powerful actors to ignore responsibility. Recognizing the humanity, dignity, and agency of displaced people is not just morally necessary, it is essential for designing responses that actually work. Refugees are more than victims of crisis. They are individuals with skills, hopes, and the capacity to rebuild if given the chance. The people of sub Saharan Africa are not defined by their displacement, they are defined by their strength and the face of it. Our responsibility is not to offer empty sympathy, but to demand a more consistent, coherent, and frankly, more humane response from our leaders and our institutions. The crisis is not unseen because it's invisible. It's unseen because too many choose to look away.
Thank you very much for your attention. We hope you understood this topic and liked the presentation and the way we presented it. Now you can see our references, and this is everything from our part. Thank you very much.